So maybe you've learned how to pronounce all of the consonants and vowels, including diphthongs, according to the rules of classical Latin, or as best as we know them. I've got a couple of my earliest videos, but please don't judge, that can give you a good refresher on this, just in case. But that's not all that there is to proper pronunciation. So let's take this word. Do you pronounce it like amicus, amicus, or amicus? So where does the stress fall? That's the big question. This video will cover the rules of proper accentuation, where you put the stress on a Latin word. Just to refresh, Latin words are divided into different syllables, and please check out my video on syllabification if you get a little confused here. A word has as many syllables as it does vowels and diphthongs, and consonants will attach themselves to either the beginning or the end of a syllable. The vowel is the substance, the consonant, the decoration. But even if you know how to syllabify a word, it still doesn't tell you where the stress falls. Syllable or syllable, right? Fortunately, Latin has some pretty standard rules for where the dominant stress falls. And pay careful attention, and I'll illustrate accent by this small diagonal mark here. First, we shouldn't have a problem with the word if it's a single syllable. Est, iam, et. Next, if the word has two syllables, the stress always falls on the first syllable. Ecce, Caesar, manne, Roma. The length of vowel has no bearing on where the accent falls. And before I get to words longer than two syllables, I first need to give a few definitions here. So let's take a rather long word like dissociabilis. I'll syllabify it, 6 syllables in all, and the last 3 syllables have terms associated with them. The last syllable, lis here, is called the ultima, literally Latin for last. The second to last syllable is called the penult. This is a compound from paine, meaning almost, and ultima, meaning last. The second to last syllable is literally almost the last one. And finally, the third to last syllable is called the antepenult. The prefix ante means before, so the third syllable is literally before the almost last one. Last, almost, before. All right, the third to last syllable. Also, keep in mind that syllables in Latin can be long or heavy, or short and light. A long or heavy syllable can consist of a long vowel, and I'll illustrate that here with this, or a diphthong, also this, or even a short vowel followed by 2 consonants, technically a closed syllable because this syllable will end in a consonant, like this. A short or light syllable typically is open with a short vowel, so the syllable doesn't end in a consonant, like this. So this is important because long and short syllables will affect our accentuation. So here's rule number 3. For words of 3 or more syllables, we accent the penult, that is the second to last syllable, if that penult is long. If the penult is short, we accent the antepenult, that is the third to last syllable. For these words, the accent falls on the penult because that is a long syllable. Regina, because the penult has a long vowel. Centaurus, because the penult has a diphthong. And de stringo, because the penult, here the syllable with the I, is closed. The I itself is short, but it's followed by 2 consonants. For these words, the accent falls on the antepenult because the penult is short. Dominus. The second to last syllable, m, is short. Faceo, the kit is short. Ambulo, because the second to last syllable, b, is short. But this accent is not permanent. So let's conjugate ambulo in the present tense. Ambulo, ambulas, ambulat. The accent falls on the first syllable. But when we go into the plural, the accent shifts. Ambulamus, ambulatis. Here the penult is long, the long A, so it's stressed. And finally, the third person plural shifts the accent back to the beginning, ambulant. So, as in any language, there are exceptions. When a syllable at the end of a word followed by a long syllable is lost, the stress falls on the last syllable. So, illic, which means there, originally was illique, but the e fell off. However, this doesn't change the accent, though it's still on the leak, illic. This also works for the imperative aduc. The original form was aduque, so the accent should naturally fall on the duc. But when the e at the end was lost, the accent stays the same. Don't worry, there are only a couple of words like this, so this isn't something that you should worry about too much. Also, the genitive and vocative of nouns that end in ius or ium keep the accent on the penult. So where Gilius has the accent here, but even the vocative and genitive look like this, you would think that the accent would change, but it doesn't. This is not Wirgili, but Wirgili. Finally, there may be an exception with enclitics. An enclitic is something like que, which means and, or we, or, that's placed at the end of a word. So this is the beginning of the Aeneid, the famous first three words, I sing of arms and the man. In the Golden Age Latin of Virgil, the accent isn't changed by the addition of an enclitic. So virum has the stress on the first syllable, the we. And when we add the enclitic que, the accent stays the same, even though the rules that I've just told you would make you think that it should be on the rum syllable. Virumque. As Latin progressed through the empire and became late Latin during the time of Constantine and Theodosius, this may have changed, but since most people learned the Latin of Virgil and Cicero, you should assume that the accent doesn't change with an enclitic. There are some other minor deviations, but these rules will cover almost any word that you'll see. So first a review before some practice. First, two-syllable words have the accent on their first syllable. Arma, virum, cano. Words with three or more syllables determine their accent based on the weight or length of the penult, the second to last syllable. If the penult is heavy or long, the accent falls there. If the penult is light or short, the accent falls on the antepenult, the third to last syllable. Okay, now to practice. So here are 6 words, and pause the video, write them down, and try to identify where their accent falls. Then start the video back up again and see how many you get right. Okay, here are the answers. We'll start with the easy one. Rego has just 2 syllables, so the accent falls on the first one, rego. Next we have latium, where the penult is short, so the accent falls on the antepenult, latium. With habitandus, the penult is long or heavy because the A is followed by 2 consonants, so that means that the accent falls on the penult, habitandus. In requiescerit, the penult is short, so the accent falls on the antepenult, requiescerit. Omnipotens has the accent on the antepenult because the penult here is short. And finally, violatus has a long penult, so that's where the accent falls.